Okay, thank you so much for this guest speech. I would like to give introduce of you firstly, and then you could start your guest speech now. General Raymond Hoppe practices Zen and Tibetan Buddhism before discovering the original Buddhism as his way through study the ancient texts. He had various teachers from different traditions, both in the West and in Asia. Today, he orients himself most towards his mentor, Bhante Bodhi, in the Sunata community. Since 2015, he teaches meditation, gives lectures, does the correspondence courses, and conducts retreats. He also translates and explains the Pali Suttas, which he sees as the guide of Buddhist practice. Raymond firstly encountered Buddhism in 1985 on a trip to Southeast Asia, lived in Japan for 4 years, studied in Hamburg and at the Karmapa International Buddhist Institution in New Delhi, and was a Theravada monk in the forest monastery tradition of Dhammayutta Nihaya in Thailand. Together with his friends, he brought the Buddha Talk, that's a discussion forum, to life, and the Buddhist aid organization Mitgefühl in Aktion in 2019, a German branch of Buddhist Global Relief. Okay, now you can begin your guest. I hope there's no failures or something wrong with your introduction. Directly.
No, it was perfect. Thank you. It was far too much of it. Hani, thank you for inviting me, and welcome everyone who is in the room. It's a pleasure for me to talk a little bit about the things that anyway are most dear to me, and the things that I like to do and practice the most. And since you invited a Buddhist, even we are in a lecture room in Humboldt University, I learned, right? I would like to invite you to listen to the sound of a bell shortly, and to use a moment of silence to come to this place and to a little bit leave behind what you brought with you, your expectations or disappointments or your stress or whatever, and to open a little bit for a wider subject, which is the world, right? The world around us. So after that silence, I will give a little praise to the Buddha, and then we become more secular and I will talk, okay? So please try to sit straight and just relax for a moment. Sit with the sense of dignity and attendance, and if you want, you may close your eyes and watch your breath as it comes in and out, and just relax. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Thank you very much, everyone. So welcome again. As far as I understand the invitation, I'm supposed to speak about social engagement and Buddhism, or why Buddhism is or should be socially engaged. Is that correct, Hani? Yeah. And using the example of Mitgefühl in Aktion, the aid organization, in English, Compassion in Action, and why we are doing that, what is our motivation, what leads us, what informs that work. First of all, I would like to mention that in the eye of even many Buddhists, but probably most people in the society, one may ask, what has Buddhism to do with social engagement? And as a matter of fact, the picture of Buddhism is that people come together at a certain place, or even simply by their own at home. They may read or learn a little bit, but most of all they meditate to feel well and to improve their life. And that's not so wrong, actually. But what is not really known, especially in the West, is that Buddhism, from its early beginning, was always very political and very much influencing the society, which is a picture that most people don't have about Buddhism. They think Buddhism is something like for my private development, for my private improvement. And as a matter of fact, in the West, as you know, we are a rather small group. Even we Buddhists have a fairly good reputation, but we are a very small group, actually. The German Buddhist Union, for example, who represent German Buddhism, the number of groups around 600, and maybe the members altogether something like 25,000, all these groups. That's not very much. Of course, if you count the ethnical Buddhist groups, like through migration from different Buddhist countries like Vietnam or Thailand or Sri Lanka or even Taiwanese, then you would come up to a higher number. But still, among the Western, so to say, groups of any kind of religious or ideological practice, we are a rather small group. Any new group like Aleviten, for instance, are much more and bigger, or the Baha'i religion. Nevertheless, Buddhism has a quite good influence in society, and that's remarkable. And it's also very much what Buddhism is actually about. As I said, Buddhism in the early stage, around 500 to 300 before our time, when the historical Buddha started this movement, if you want to say, it influenced the whole society to such an extent that very soon after the Buddha disappeared or died, if you want, the Indian subcontinent became a Buddhist continent through Ashoka, the king Ashoka mainly, and it spread it all over the place, including today's Afghanistan region and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and the Himalayan region. And around maybe 600 or even 400 our time, the whole continent was full of Buddhist temples and different groups of Buddhists. And then that got destroyed around 800 to 1200 mainly by the invasion of the Osmanic kingdom. But nevertheless, the subcontinent India changed so much that they actually very soon after the Buddha, around Ashoka's time, they stopped having armies. They established care for elderly people. They did something for the environment. They protected animals. And there are so many things that actually happen through Buddhist influence, mainly unknown to us, that you should think about the Buddhist movement as a political movement, not only a personal movement. And when you look in the West, it doesn't necessarily have to be only Europe. You can go to the United States or any Western country where Buddhism is introduced. There is not even one person who has not heard about mindfulness. Have you? Of course, mindfulness, the mindfulness movement, if you want to say, like a stress reductive based, mindfulness-based stress reduction, as you probably know. And the whole society, in a way, has already some influence from Buddhism, which are not always connected to Buddhism. Even the German word Achtsamkeit, the word for mindfulness, was invented by a Buddhist monk, a German Buddhist monk, and is known to everyone. Also, the word Mitfreude is actually a Buddhist invention. Mitgefühl is is also a Buddhist invention. The word was Mitleid, like compassion. The old word was Mitleid in about Nietzsche's time, when Buddhism was in the very beginning, and scholars or authors started to read about Buddhism. They discussed the term Mitleid, and with the time it changed into Mitgefühl. I have no idea if that word was ever used before. Now we use the word empathy a lot, of course, right? But that is basically the same meaning. And so I would claim that even the Buddhist movement, I don't dare to say the Buddhist religion, because even Buddhists are not so sure if that is a religion or philosophy or psychology. But let's say the Buddhist movement is, in a sense, not without a mission. It has indeed a mission. And that mission is plainly, and I brought that with me, I will show that on the screen. Yeah. The mission is simply, may all beings be happy. It sounds very simple, but it is indeed a very high goal. May all beings be happy. I mean, just think for a moment, it would be enough if I say, may you be happy, may I be happy. But as a matter of fact, the Buddhist wish is that all beings may be happy, at peace, and be well. And that is independent of the tradition. It may be a very old school, like I belong to, the Theravada school, or it may be a Mahayana school or a Zen group. We all share the same profession, which is that we basically daily practice the wish that all beings shall be well. May all beings be happy. In the original text in Pali, it's called Sabbe Satta Sukhita Hontu. And that brings us to the question, is that Buddhist wish just a religious wish that you develop in meditation? And some Buddhists may say so, may say that mainly this is for developing a heart full of compassion, of joy, of sympathy, of metta, of kindness, as we say. But the Buddha taught two words for compassion, and that I also would like to introduce to you. One word is called karuna, and another is anukampa. Okay, and the word karuna, the Buddha borrowed from a Vedic tradition. It means something like a holy act of empathy, a holy act of compassion. And that karuna is something that Buddhists practice frequently in meditation, so-called the four immeasurables, also called the godly abidance, like Brahma Vihara is the Pali word. And in that practice, which you find in every school, you try to get a calm heart and feel the kindness that is intrinsic to your own nature. The term karuna applies to meditative practice, that when you sit down and wish well-being for yourself, it's always for yourself and for others, and for your surrounding. You start with your family, you go on to your colleagues and neighbors, to difficult people, try to wish them well-being, and then you try to spread this into the whole world. That kind of kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and even equanimity, these four aspects of love, if you want to say, is a Buddhist practice. And it can be done without being involved in anything, without being active or be part of a helping hand group. But there's another Pali word for compassion that the Buddha used in a different way. And I want to show you that too, so that you can write it down. And that word is anukampa. Anukampa means shaking with, literally. Shaking with. And that term is far more important for our subject today than karuna. Karuna is a personal, if you want to say, religious practice. But anukampa is a co-responsibility with the suffering of others. The Buddha used that word anukampa for compassion when he established certain rules in his order, or when he was asked by a king to give some advice. Then he said often, I'm doing this or I'm advising in this way because I have anukampa with further and future generations. Like I have co-responsibility. I'm shaking with, I'm suffering with the needy and those who will even come after us. And something that is also not so known to people is that the Buddha actually in his Buddhist order, monastic order, established a lot of laws that are just for protection of animals, for the protection of environment, for the protection of regions, and which make very much sense. Like in the rainy season, when Buddhist monks supposed to, or before the rainy season became a retreat time as a rule, the Buddhist monk used to walk everywhere in the country because they are mendicants, they don't stay at one place. But then the Buddha said, please stop walking in the rainy season because you're destroying the crops. Please stay at one place and meditate there in a group until you don't destroy the crops in the field anymore. So even that was a Buddhist rule, like a monastic rule. And one incident I also would like to mention is the Buddha deliberately made friends with influential people. He was quite clever to establish his teaching not only among seekers, but among those who are in power. In his time, usually small kingdoms with kings, but there was a group of Lichavis and other ethnical groups around Vaishali, north of the region of Padma. I don't know, you maybe heard about Bihar. The country is now called Bihar, but in the Buddha time it was Magadha, the main country, with a kingdom, and north of that were small ethnical groups, and they formed a federation and asked the Buddha, in which way can we organize ourselves without a king in order to survive and be strong against enemies and stay as a group? And then the Buddha came and gave them 10 rules how they should organize themselves. And they are, from a modern standpoint of view, very much democratic outlines. He said, you should come together frequently and discuss things and decide them together. You should protect and honor elderly people and ill people. You should not change certain tradition, and so on and so on. He had 10 rules, and he really was very much engaged to help this federation of ethnical groups to organize themselves in a peaceful way. And when he was asked by kings, often kings came to him and said, do you think it will be good to fight against this or that country because we are in danger? Then the Buddha said, if you do that, you will have only a lot of problems. And often he went even to a place and tried to mediate between groups. There was one occasion where there was a lot of poverty in the country, and people started to become criminal and steal a lot because there was poverty. And then he talked to the king and said, you should open your, I don't know the English word, Speicher, corn, the storage for corn, right?
Yeah.
Like, kings would take a little bit from every harvest and store a lot for themselves, right? And he said, you should open that and freely give to everyone so that they can start their business again. And from your wealth, you should not take tax from the people, but in this time of poverty, you should spread your money and give to everyone a means for living so that they can reestablish economy. And then you will see your criminal activities in the country will cease. And that actually happened. This king listened to this advice and he gave out his wealth, and then all the problems in the country went down. This is just one example more to see that the Buddha had indeed a lot of co-responsibility for his generation and for his country. And that very aspect of Buddhism is, to me, vitally important, because we Buddhists have a certain view about the world, which we call paticca samuppada. I would also like to show you that. In German, bedingtes Entstehen, in English, co-dependency or co-arising. And that means that everything that happens is interconnected with each other or with another. Sorry for my English. Everything that we do has an effect on impulse to someone or something. There's nothing that you can do just for you. Whatever you do is influencing others, and others are influencing you. That's actually common sense to us. But for the Buddhist practice, this is one of the highest principles of life, or even highest principles of self-improvement, that we deeply understand that we cannot live or be for ourselves. I mean, I had a mother and a father, and I wouldn't be here without them. But my father died already. My mother is old and lives far away. When I'm here in my little place in Basthorst, everything that happens around the world influences my life directly. And what I do is influencing the life of others. And that is, of course, common sense. But for Buddhists, this is a practice, the practice of interdependency. And that goes in our understanding so far that what I'm thinking is influencing another. And what another is thinking is influencing me. What Trump is doing in Florida has an impact on us. What Putin is doing with Ukraine has, of course, an impact on us. It is not necessary to talk about. I mean, if you, like me, has to pay for your own heating system, then you cannot ignore that everything that happens, no matter where, has a direct influence on others. And of course, we know that this very environment that we are living in, this precious planet that gives us Buddhists, from our understanding, the opportunity to develop and free our mind and to experience happiness and to unfold a life. I'm so dependent on air and water and food, like everyone around the world. And when there's a pollution, I'm influenced by it. And of course, there is not a time where we would not understand this more deeply than now, since we live still in a worldwide pandemic situation, even though we don't feel that so strongly anymore. But we all remember that a small virus changed the whole world. And to say it again, what happens in the Ukraine is not independent of us, and we are not independent of what happens there. We are, as a matter of fact, a part of the reason that it happens. And we will be a part of the reason when it stops. Even we are very personally only concentrating on us. Whatever we do and how we live is part of a whole unity. And when Buddhists really reflect on that, there is really no chance to say, I want to have a happy, small life and just practice some Buddhism and, be happy for myself, you cannot ignore that there is a wider world that we are part of. And when you really understand that, you want to be more consciously involved in that. And the good thing is that even though in Buddhism there are these different tendencies, there are the so-called immanent-oriented Buddhists or secular Buddhists who say, Buddhism may be this or that, but what is good is that I have some tools to improve my life, to practice mindfully, to learn wisdom, to improve my life in a certain way. And then there's the complete other side, which we call the traditionalists or the transcendent, those who are interested in future lives or in afterlife, which of course includes a certain sense of there could be something after death, or there could be a further life, or even interested in something like nirvana or nibbana, a state beyond this world, a transcendent state of bliss and happiness. But both groups have the same understanding of this interdependency. And that's the reason that when Buddhists start to become engaged in any activity, it unites them no matter from which group. I belong to a very traditional group, and I'm definitely longing for a state of nibbana personally. But I have friends who say, forget about all the things that are from India and karma and all these things and godly words and whatever. Forget about it. I only want to practice Buddhism as a way of self-improvement. Still, we can come together on the same goal. We have to be a part of the answer, and we cannot ignore that people are suffering in this world. Let's do something together. And I brought you a little introduction through a video where I want to show you what happened out of that. And I may just show you that and then talk a little bit more about reason why getting engaged in poverty relief. I'm trying if this works. Yeah.
Es gibt ja Leute, die meinen, wir Buddhisten brauchen nur meditieren und dann wäre alles gut. Aber das stimmt gar nicht.
Mitgefühl am Kissen zu kultivieren ist eine wunderschöne Übung. Aber Hungernde werden halt dafür nicht satt.
Mich dem Leid der Welt zuzuwenden, ist für mich auch ein Teil der Praxis.
Eigentlich ist das wirklich eine gute Sache, dass dieses Mitgefühl und die Praxis auch wirklich in die Tat umgesetzt wird.
Ja, und aus dieser Idee raus hat sich dann entwickelt, eine Hilfsorganisation zu gründen, die sich zum Ziel setzt, das Mitgefühl dahingehend zu entwickeln, tatsächlich Menschen in Not auch Hilfestellung zu geben.
Und dann bin ich aufmerksam geworden, dass in Amerika die Organisation Buddhist Global Relief unter dem ehrenwerten Mönch Bhikkhu Bodhi entstanden ist. Und wir haben uns 2018 getroffen und haben den Verein Mitgefühl in Aktion gegründet.
Mitgefühl in Aktion was established as a European sister organization to our US organization, Buddhist Global Relief.
Über unseren Projektpartner Buddhist Global Relief hatten wir sehr schnell auch Projekte. Projektarbeit läuft bei uns momentan so, dass wir für unsere Projekte jeweils einen Projektpaten haben.
Als Projektpate halte ich den Kontakt zu dem Projekt, ein Rucksacksanitäter-Projekt in Myanmar. Die Rucksacksanitäterinnen und Sanitäter leisten medizinische Versorgung unter sehr, sehr schweren Bedingungen. Es sind Gebiete, in denen ethnische Minderheiten leben, die teilweise auch vom Militär verfolgt werden. Wir unterstützen damit speziell die Familien der Rucksacksanitäterinnen und Sanitäter. Denn deren Arbeit ist nur möglich, wenn die Familien in Sicherheit an einem sicheren Ort leben. Das heißt, Ausbildung erhalten, Unterkunft, selbstverständlich auch Nahrung. Ich lerne dabei sehr, sehr viel über die Lebensweisen, über die Probleme dort und empfinde das wirklich als eine sehr wertvolle und auch befriedigende Tätigkeit.
Ich bin Projektpatin für das Projekt in Kamerun. Ein Projekt insbesondere für ausgegrenzte Frauen und alleinerziehende Mütter. Die können dort vor Ort eine Ausbildung absolvieren. Im Anschluss daran bekommen sie ein kleines Startkapital, um sich selbstständig machen zu können. Das Schöne ist auch, dass sie ihre Fähigkeiten dann auch weitergeben können an ihre Kinder und somit eine bessere Perspektive aufzeigen können für die Zukunft. Meine Aufgabe als Projektpatin ist unter anderem auch die Mitglieder zu informieren über den Stand des Projekts, damit die wissen, wo die Gelder hinfließen.
In der Mongolei unterstützen wir Slumkinder. Es sind eigentlich keine Slumkinder, sondern Nomadenkinder, deren Eltern aber das Nomadenleben aufgeben mussten und deswegen in die Hauptstadt Ulaanbaatar gezogen sind und dort wie in Slums in ihren Jurten leben, bei minus 40 Grad in der Großstadt. Und da gibt es eine buddhistische Organisation, die sich gesagt hat, wir müssen diesen Kindern helfen und gibt ihnen soziale Hilfe, Schulbegleitung und langsame Eingliederung in eine Ausbildung.
Unser Ziel ist eigentlich immer, dass man die Leute in die Lage versetzt, ihr Leben selber in die Hand zu nehmen. Und die beste Möglichkeit ist, in eine gute Ausbildung zu investieren. Ein Projekt, das mir auch sehr am Herzen liegt, ist in Indien initiiert von Aya Yeshe, auch einer buddhistischen Nonne. Da geht es uns hauptsächlich darum, Mädchen, die besonders betroffen sind von Zwangsheirat und sonstigen, zu unterstützen, dass sie einfach ein eigenbestimmtes Leben führen können, eine Berufsausbildung machen, eine schulische Ausbildung absolvieren, um ja ein Stück weit diesem Kreislauf der Armut zu entkommen.
When you see these pictures of children in a foreign country who don't live like you, it can feel a little bit abstract, but I assure you that every euro you give changes a life, rescues a girl from child marriage. Those people are just the same as you. They want good things for their children, and it is personal for them. You know, when you give, it changes a life.
Das ist nicht eine anonyme Spende irgendwo hin, sondern man kriegt dann auch Rückmeldungen, was das an Veränderungen bewirkt. Und wie das die Sozialstruktur an den Orten auch verändert. Und das fördert wiederum die Zuversicht, dass Geben Situationen verändert.
Er soll ja ein bisschen lächeln, ne? Aber trotzdem noch gleichmütig bleiben. Ja, unser großes Vorbild, das Mitgefühl des Buddha, was alle Menschen einschließt.
I hope you could see and read the subtitles in case you don't understand German. Yes, that is our small aid organization that we started 2019. The idea came up in 2018 when Bhante Bhikkhu Bodhi, his name is more known as Bhikkhu Bodhi, visited Hamburg, and then we came together and I said that to Bhante, I think we should start something like you did in the States, also in Europe. And very soon, actually, we got a lot of support and enthusiasm among Buddhists. And now I can claim that in a very short time, this aid organization, especially because it's not related to any religious purpose or it's not related to any denomination. It's totally open and only for the purpose of helping out of compassion. A lot of people have sympathy with that, and that so much encourages me, because how can you actually even eat a piece of bread when you know that someone else is starving? As a Buddhist, how can you establish, inner peace when you know that someone is suffering? That is a contradiction. How can I be happy when you suffer? How can you be happy when I suffer? The most natural thing, and you don't need to be a Buddhist for that, you just need to be human, is that you want to share the good that you experience and have a kind of balance, that somewhere where there is less will be a little bit more, and where here is a lot, there will be a bit less, right? Balance. And we do live in a global world where everything is so interconnected that there is not even one piece of clothes that I wear that did not travel around Asia or somewhere else to certain circles of production. As a matter of fact, this very thing that I'm wearing was actually, when I ordered, I did not know it came from China, right? So I'm part of something that was produced in China. So someone earned money there or earned less money there because I am buying it here. We do support a work in Bangladesh, and during the pandemic season in 2020, you maybe all know that in Bangladesh, clothes were sorted together that before were harvested in India, then sent to China for being dyed, and then it goes to Bangladesh, put together as clothes, then it goes to the Philippines into packages, and it ends up in New Yorker and M&M and so on. And because there was less selling here during the pandemic season, then they did not order these clothes. And thousands of families starved, or that's not the correct word, had no income in Bangladesh and had to give their children away to others because they literally could not survive. And that's only because we misused that cheap income, their little income, to have always a supply of clothes. And when we don't need it, we forget about them. And how can I, as a Buddhist, just look away and say, yeah, that's the suffering of the world? No, it's my suffering, isn't it? I belong, together with you, to the 80% of humanity or humans who use, the 20% of humans who use 80% of all the goods and wealth of this world and leave the 20% to a group of 80% of humans. Does it make sense to you? It sounds like a simple counting, but it is actually true. We all here are rich like kings. I mean, in past times, my life would be called like the most wealthy and rich life. I'm living actually by donations, right? I don't even have a proper income. But to be honest, I am rich. Every day I have plenty of food. I sometimes have to throw my food away because I can't eat it. It's too much. When we have a retreat, we just had a retreat, then there's so much left over that I go to the neighbors and they said, we have our own food, thank you. And sometimes we have to waste it. And in order that you can buy a salad fresh and nice looking every day in a supermarket, they have to throw away in the evening or in the morning in the Bioton in German, like the garbage for bio. A lot of food that actually are still eatable, just doesn't look so good anymore. But the price has to be fixed. The price should not go down, and they have to lock those boxes so that no one takes it out. It's a pity. It's really a pity. And I think it is the most natural thing that when you would like to develop your own mind towards happiness, that you cannot look away that there are people who are suffering. And that to me is the highest Buddhist practice, is to put into action what you actually are staying for, what you are believing in, if you want to say, or what you wish for yourself. And so we started this small organization. We don't have a lot of power. We started with zero money. In the first year, we had 25,000. In the next year, 50,000, and so on. It always doubled in a way. But we could already establish 8 projects. One is a help in the Ukraine, actually, where we help in difficult regions and refugees too. And we have one work in Bangladesh, one on the border of Burma, Myanmar, among ethnic groups like the Rohingyas. We support girls with education who would come under human trafficking because they're from poor families in Cambodia. In Cameroon, we supporting women who got raped and thrown out of the society and give them a place to live and a place to raise their child and find education and start their own business. And I don't remember where else. In Senegal, we supported an agricultural project and so on. It's so far very small help in the sense that the world is suffering. I mean, 1 million people at present are suffering from acute or chronic hunger. And why do we choose to work against poverty? Why don't we do like Greta and say we have to change the whole system? We have to establish justice for the environment and so on, because it is too big. It is too big. We have to start with something that is acceptable by everyone. Also, I forgot, we also so far help actually girls in education in Afghanistan, which is just about to be impossible because the Taliban has forbidden that even women help in such organization, and definitely girls are not allowed to get university education anymore. But why are we helping people against poverty? Why do we focus on nutrition? And the reason is very simple. There might be a dictatorship or a regime like Taliban, or a war going on, or it doesn't matter what political situation. One thing that everyone in the world agrees is that the basic need for survival is food, is nutrition. And with the aim to help people who are starving, there is basically no regime who would not welcome that you help in their region. But once you start to establish such a work, you have a political influence. You become a voice in the society because you help the region. And what our goal is of course that all these small circles of help will grow as much that people there will be able to influence their society. And important emphasis, therefore, is on the education of especially girls, to empower girls through education, because that is the root of poverty. The root of poverty is that people cannot help themselves in a sustainable way. In order to do that, their children should not go on the field very soon, but have education in order to establish their own independent life. And to help girls, I forgot also to say, like the Dalit girls that you saw in the video. Dalit is an outcast caste in India. Usually they live in slums and they are not allowed to attend schools. But when they went to schools, there's nothing you can take away from them. If they are able to work and if they become through education a part of the society, they are able to change their own environment, their own background. And that encourages us a lot to do such a work, even though it is a very small work, and you could say there are already big organizations. Why do we still do it as a small organization, and why do we still think that Buddhists should be engaged? Is because the more colorful the kind of help is, the more independent help will be. Think about the UNESCO. They are so powerful. Why can't they help the Rohingyas in Bangladesh and lead them back to Burma and give them life and livable conditions? There is enough money, but there are political reasons. But a small NGO like us, we are totally independent of any political involvement. We can just do our little work and connect with other small little works, and together it becomes a network, and it, like interdependency, it influences and helps in many ways. Now my feeling is, Hanyi, that I should come to an end and open it up for question. Was there anything, Hanyi, that you wanted me to say further than that?
No, it's perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for your speech. And I think we've got two steps. So one of them is for the general Q&A, another is for the interview questions of Feiyang and Alex. So first of all, general questions regarding Raymond's speech.
It was just an impulse, actually. It was not really a speech, but please feel free to question what I said, or to question further to things that I didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure about the difference between Karuna and Anukampa. So because it's like an personal action, the Karuna, but then the Anukampa, when you shake with someone,
that was
like a high degree of compassion, or what's the difference there?
Yeah, the translation of both words is compassion or Mitgefühl, usually. But actually, Karuna is what you establish inside of you. Like in meditation, you can feel deep empathy for suffering or for people who suffer, but you don't do anything. You just wish them well-being, which is, from a Buddhist standpoint, also an act of compassion, that I wish that you may be happy, but I continue my life. But Anukampa means that you have a co-responsibility in society. You have to go out and be part of the answer. You have to raise your voice. You have to say, we have to change this injustice, right? So Anukampa calls you for an active form of compassion. That's why the organization that we started is called Mitgefühl in Aktion, compassion in action. You can have compassion with those who suffer and still do nothing. But Anukampa means you have to go out and be active.
Yes, hello there. First of all, thank you for your little speech. And even though I want to say, even though you're not in the same room with us, me personally, I sense a very good energy from you. So I
thank you.
Appreciate the time you give us to talk about what you're doing. And my question was, when Hani introduced you, she mentioned that you got in touch with Buddhism in Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, for the very first time, or somewhere in Southeast Asia. Is that correct?
Almost, yeah. My first contact was actually in Sri Lanka. That was the beginning of a East Asia tour that ended up in Japan. I became a monk in Thailand later, but my first contact was actually Sri Lanka.
And just out of curiosity, what was the moment when you first touched base with Buddhism? What was it?
Oh, it was a déjà vu for me, because I was very much brought up as a Christian with all the negative side to it, right? And I had no interest in Buddhism at all. As a matter of fact, and those hippie times of my young time, a friend became a Buddhist and he was so fancy, and I thought, that's really crazy. I was not interested. But when I went to Sri Lanka with my wife, actually, we married quite early, was 22, and we got out of Sri Lanka. We wanted to go to Japan, but the cheapest way to travel was, at that time, you have this open ticket. You wait till they tell you, yes, you can go on next week with that and that flight to that and that country, and so on. So we just went and to whatever place. And coincidentally, it was Sri Lanka. And at that time, Sri Lanka was at civil war. Right? It was the Tamil Tiger time. And the country was at war. And when we got out of the plane, I felt something very, very strange. I had the feeling that I already knew that place. And I don't know why, but my whole awareness changed totally. I woke up in the morning like 3 or 4 o'clock, and I would say to my wife, today we have to go to Velavata or to Kandy. I'm sure we have to go there. And she said, let me sleep. We have holiday or whatever. But I needed to go somewhere. And then we actually went there. And then it was, for instance, in Kandy, where I felt, let's go up this hill. I feel we have to go there. And then we went there, and then there was a temple. And that temple was about to close the doors with military. And I said, let's go in. And it coincidentally was the last ceremony of the teeth of the Buddha who was enthroned there. And it was my first ceremony of Buddhist ceremony that I attended. And I was actually not invited. We just slipped in because it happened. And then all these encounters with Buddhism kind of touched me. And I felt there is something peaceful about it, and I became very interested in it. And somehow Sri Lanka changed my life totally, because I had the feeling that I belong somehow to this orientation, if you want to say, and I found it more intelligent than religious belief that I was brought up with, which really divides the world in good and bad and so on, and all this idea of sin and someone dies for you and so was not very attractive to me. And Buddhists just were very peaceful and thought about everyone is in a way of improvement and just needs a little bit more help. But anyway, one day at a certain time, maybe many, many lives, anyone will become a Buddha. I found that very attractive. And then very slowly in other countries like Japan, I started with the Buddhist practice, and then it went on like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And maybe adding on to that, how was it for you to, with the language barrier? Was there ever a language barrier in your studies? And why did you go from Japan and then back to Thailand to like more of a traditional school?
Yeah, that is a bit funny in my life that always had to do with a lot of languages. Yeah, I actually learned Japanese very well. I still do speak Japanese. But I also learned this, as you already encountered, this old language Pali. It's just a Prakrit dialect of the Buddha's time, because these old texts are written in it. And no, languages were never a barrier for me. Somehow I have a certain tendency to be interested in languages. But in Thailand, as a matter of fact, I was living as a monk in silence in the forest monastery with less communication, and my Thai is really limited. But that was the only place where I actually did not develop enough communication skill. But yes, languages were always very helpful. Languages also translate mentality and inform you about culture. So languages, we learn a lot of things that are conceptual, different to our own upbringing or education.
And why did you then decide to go from a Zen school back to Theravada?
Yeah, that's a downgrading, as I sometimes say. Of course, it's not a downgrading, but I say so because usually the Theravada is from the Mahayana, from the later Buddhism, it's seen as a lesser capacity school, so too much on ethics and so on. The reason was simply I encountered Theravada Buddhism first, but then I ended up in Japan, and there they practice a lot of Zen Buddhism. And I just went to a temple and learned a little bit of meditation. And when I came back to Germany to study, actually, to Hamburg, there were about 6 Buddhist groups at that time in the city. And I found the Tibetan center the most attractive, and I entered that group, and I wholeheartedly went through the curriculum or the demands of that school and studied that, and then even went to India to study Tibetan Buddhism in a monastery. And while I did so, I started to read always further back to the root texts and ended up with the Pali Canon. And that Pali Canon, from the very old time of the Buddha, the first recitation of the Buddha's teaching, they inspired me so much that I thought, wow, not later schools, but this very historical Buddha, he knew what he was talking about. And that became my orientation. So with the time, I just changed then to an old school, historical oriented Buddhism in a way. And I became very happy with it, to be honest. And by the way, what influenced the society is actually a Theravada school, because the whole mindfulness movement that everyone says, oh, that's cool, comes from the Theravada school, actually from the very old school. Now, it's not so rigid as you think. Theravada is very practical. It's scientific. You can use historical criticism on text and explore it with exegeticals and hermeneutical tools. It's really, you can learn a lot from the hermeneutical schools in theology. I use the theology, the Frankfurt School, and have you heard about Bultmann, Sitz im Leben? There are great ideas among New Testament scholars how to approach old texts. And that basically is the same method by which I translate the old recitation of the Buddhist text, actually. Like if you know the German word Formgeschichte, Gattungsgeschichte, and so on, that is very helpful.
Any question?
Okay. No, it's my first time here, so I don't know what the people here talked about before. Well, I have a question. Maybe it can be for everybody. I just read a book about like Buddhism for beginners, and also my father, he practiced for like ages, but somehow I have one issue, and it's about the belief system that the human consciousness is on top of animal consciousness, and I really don't get that because I think like a dolphin or a whale or like I don't know what other animals, like maybe not a dog, but I don't know. I just don't get this hierarchy of the human being on the top, you know?
Exactly. I do have the same strange feeling when I hear something like that, and it's not Buddhist at all, to be honest. First of all, consciousness depends on the senses, right? On sense perception. Consciousness is not something that is static, right? We don't awaken to a new consciousness. That is esoteric stuff, which I don't agree on. When you get before you get an operation and they give you anesthesia, you don't have any consciousness. You can't remember anything. Consciousness is utterly depending on the body and on the senses. And animals have the same ability to be conscious about the things that they sense through their ears, eyes, nose, and whatever. And often they are higher developed, like a dog can smell anything. And a dog has even the sense to know when its its owner will leave the company to drive home. They don't have a time, but somehow they know it's about time he will come. When you like dogs, you will see that they are very intelligent and their awareness is very highly developed. There's only one difference, and that maybe was meant by what you heard, that there is a difference in the ability to use that consciousness, which depends on language. Like we talk and we put things that we experience into notions, into abstract words, and we can look at it like in a metaphysical way. We can talk about the concept of beauty. A dog just thinks, oh, this is beautiful or not, I guess, right? When I see you, you are very beautiful. We can talk about the concept. Why do I think you are beautiful? And others may think you should be blonde to be beautiful. It's a concept. We can talk about these certain things, and by talking about it, we can reflect our own thinking. And that is the difference to an animal. What is often called instinctual behavior is nothing else that the ability to communicate and put things on a different level of perception, or to even make your thought a sense perception. You need language. And so in a way, we are blessed with the ability of using more forms of language than animals. But I don't think that makes animals in a way less valuable or something. It's just a different experience, right?
I'm like sure that animals don't communicate with each other, because like I see birds, for example, in, I don't know, in Peru, and then there's like the sun coming up or down and stuff, and everybody's like dancing around and stuff, and they
exactly.
or like whales, they do have their art like communication.
Oh, absolutely. I'm living here very much in the nature, and I do observe all that too. When birds come together to fly away, the way that they talk and chat every day I can experience that, the intelligence of their communication. But what I meant is that you are gifted with an ability that really definitely puts your thinking on in a different, not on a different level, that may be strange, but you can abstract your thoughts. And that's something that I think, I'm not sure, is maybe different in an animal world, but I wouldn't say that they communicate less, but to put it into abstract or to get in distance to it, you need to put it out in words or somehow. But to give another emphasis, I do believe that, or I observe that animals can think a lot about what they experience, and they can even meditate. There was a master called the 16th Karmapa from Tibet, who went to Sikkim as a refugee, and he was really a master of meditation, and he loved animals, and he could talk a lot to animals, and he always had a lot of birds who wanted to come to him, and he could communicate with these birds and other animals a lot, and he taught them meditation, right? And put them somewhere and said, you should do like this. And they were sitting there, and you had the feeling that they really understood, right? But it's still, there is a difference, this so-called human world. You have a very fair balance of suffering and happiness, of the experience of suffering and happiness. And we probably are privileged to do a lot more with that material of sense perception and experience than in a situation where I see that also every day in my big garden, where animals have to run after food so much. I mean, just at the moment, it's so difficult for animals to find food. Sometimes deers come in my garden and they eat almost everything, but because in the forest is not enough at the moment. Birds, the whole day they have to go after food because in the winter they don't find so much. And when I want to put some corns for them, then actually the rats come in the night and eat everything away. There is a lot of fight among them for food. And luckily, that brings us back to poverty. We are mainly as humans, we are in a state where we can do a lot for our inner experience because the outer situation is fairly balanced, right? Not for everyone, but you are very, very privileged to sit in a university and to just listen to a talk. You don't have to worry the whole day what you eat in the evening. That is really something very, very special. But there is no different value in the beings. Actually, a Buddhist view of beings is that they're all equal, right? Not only women and men and third gender or whatever, or different countries, but all beings. There is actually not even a difference between a bacteria in your stomach and you. You are a sentient being as well as a bacteria is a sentient being. Coming back to codependency, you cannot live without a lot of beings supporting your body. I mean, there are about 80 small animals in your body permanently, right? You just have to see that the balance is okay. But you cannot digest without bacteria, can you? And the virus, the coronavirus, is just a very intelligent strike of nature to balance things, actually, right? Because we disbalance things all the time. And those, where will you stop? Is a virus not a sentient being? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. At least an ant is a sentient being, isn't it? And there are far more ants in this world than humans. Like the species of humans is just, from our standpoint of view, it's big, but from the standpoint of ants, we're just minority. And they are so intelligent. It's amazing. They have this this collective consciousness that they all work together. They don't see themselves as single and apart. And have you seen how they greet each other with high five and exchange information so quickly, just by smell and by touch? And it's amazing. Animals are amazing. Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, they prepare the interview questions and now they would like to address you. And they've got a research question and an interview question.
Yeah. Okay. So can we start our interview?
Please, go ahead.
And we would like to record this interview.
Of course, go ahead.
So the first, our interview is basically aimed at your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Your organization. I mean the compassion in action.
Exactly.
And the first question is that how do you combine compassion with your social engagement?
How I combine compassion with my social engagement?
Not particularly of you, but your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the whole organization is about engagement in compassion, isn't it? So I would say the organization is the answer of how to combine compassion with action. The organization is for us one way to live this, right? But I'm not so sure if I really understood your question. Can you repeat it again?
So my question is, how do your organization combine compassion? I only mean this word compassion with your social engagement. So I mean how you based on this compassion and do something in your social engagement.
So we call for social engagement out of the motivation of compassion. We say, don't we have empathy? Yes, we have empathy. Then let's do something. So compassion for us is the motivating factor, actually, and we invite people of this people who have a sense for compassion. They are welcome to join in. They don't have to be Buddhist. So what we, so to say, our credo is compassion, right? But we don't want to put this compassion only into a wish. We want to put it actually in financial and practical and organizational help. So we want to put this in action insofar as we say it's not enough if you have compassion with those who suffer, but you have to share what you have. When you have €2, why don't you give 1? When you have 100,000, why don't you give 80,000? And it works somehow.
Okay, so the next one is the purpose of your organization is to make a better world step by step. And the first is to fight against the hunger, and then the others like education and equal rights and something else. And in which stage are you at now?
That's a nice question. As a matter of fact, I don't believe, and no one else, I think, would believe that poverty will ever be cured. The Buddha called the lack of food the most severe illness, the most severe suffering. But it belongs to the word forever. It's almost impossible to get rid of poverty, because there is injustice in the world and we probably are not able to fix it, to be quite honest. But the reaction to say because injustice will prevail, we don't get engaged is, from our understanding, the wrong attitude. Because the world is unjust, because we treat the environment in a very, very bad way, everyone who is able should raise their voice and help. We are probably the last generations of this planet. I'm pretty sure that we don't have a lot of time. And I think it's like a minute to 12 to do something. And if we all, die by helping each other, it would be, for me, still a better world than if we fight for our little survival. So to be not a prepper who cares for his own survival, but to be a sharer, that is the idea. But I'm not sure that we will be able really to make big changes. It's more like it's a small light in the darkness, but a small light still leads some people to find the way.
Yes, I'll have some further questions. How are the people in need you showed to us in the movie, in the clip, for instance, in Mongolia or Myanmar, Cameroon, India? How are they being chosen for the 8 projects you're pursuing?
First of all, according to German law, we can only act as developing aid with sustainable and empowering activities, meaning the reason why we are tax reduced is because we're doing part of the work of the Entwicklungshilfeminister. It's now called Entwicklungszusammenarbeit. So Germany is called to help in certain regions, and because politically they are limited in some ways, they support NGOs like us or make them tax reduced because we do this sustainable self-help. And the way we can do it is only that certain organizations who on the field are in the state of being an NGO apply to us with in a formal way, and then we take at least 3 months, which is actually just now from January till April. We are just evaluating applicants for help, and then we come together in different meetings and groups, also with the American organization, and we discuss in which way we can actually do a sustainable and responsible work. And then when we grant them a certain amount of money for this year's work, then they have to report to us, and we can go there and observe that. And the principles that we choose for ourselves is that it should be not emergency help that we do only at the moment in the Ukraine, but it should be a sustainable work where regions get empowered to actually change poverty at its root. And that's why we focus on children and girls in education. Like in Vietnam, we give the families food on the very day that they let the girls go to school. And by this trick, if you want to say, both have a benefit. The families don't feel they have to sell their girls. Actually, every 4th child gets sold in Cambodia because of poverty. The girls get education and the families get food. The very day they come back from school, they bring food and rice. We call that rice scholarship. And so we choose those organizations where we feel they are most responsible, reliable, and they must be NGOs in the country, on the ground, in the field. Otherwise, we can't work together with them. And then we evaluate that on the end of the year and decide whether we continue that work or not.
Okay. Another question. What are the requirements to become a mentor of one of the international aid programs in your organization?
A mentor? We call them lead person for projects. Actually, there is no requirement because we are we're doing grassroots work. We are all very much beginners and volunteers and so on. If you would like to help, the only thing is that you yourself have to bring some longer commitment, because you will have to learn a lot about that country, that project, to begleiten, to support.
Yeah, to support, yeah.
To support and assist that project. So if you would say, I would be interested to be engaged for that project in Cameroon, then in order to introduce you to the leading person there as our leading person for that project, we would need that you have some commitment for a longer time. But basically, nothing else is needed, you know, just a bit engagement and the maybe language. Yeah, English is necessary always. And you would have to learn a little bit more. You have to read reports and be part of a evaluation process, but there's nothing else one needs.
Okay.
So welcome to join us.
It does sound very interesting. I was just wondering simultaneously while you were answering my question, do you have to be on site, or is it also feasible?
Yeah, it would be our wish that every year we would be able to travel there. But we started out in Corona times, and then the world changed. We did the whole organization by Zoom meetings actually. And that helps actually a lot because you can connect with these projects anytime, right? Better than through telephone, actually. But the best would be that the lead person would from time to time travel there, which also happens, and it happened before in Buddhist Global Relief, that one gets familiar with the work on the field, because that is also for the project very good. One can assist better when you travel there. But it's a question of money. We don't want to spend money on the support of stuff. We do everything so far without payment. No one gets paid. It's all just idealistic. No one gets any money. We send 100% to the project, actually. Even we support we pay ourselves for the transfer so that nothing gets lost. But so if one wants to travel there, one probably has to travel there as a part of one's holiday. But that would be very welcomed. Yeah, that would be nice.
And how is it dealt with in Germany? Do you live all in the same town, or?
No. We started out in Hamburg, actually, and with some friends from Hamburg, that was the core group. But we met in Berlin, just where you are, in a Buddhist center as 12 interested people from Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. And till today, the organization has members, I think we're about 35 members or something like this now, from all German-speaking countries, like is independent of the place. The office is here in Bastos, where I am now, but all the board meetings and whatever happen through Zoom usually. We come together possibly once a year in person, but we are very used to connect with each other through Signal chats and through Zoom meetings and email and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, your room seems fairly organized behind you, so we can.
My room?
Yeah, it's like nicely decorated.
So that's actually, I'm working with those books.
Yeah. Another question. I have to open my form real quick. You also mentioned that you merged with the Buddhist Global Relief by the American monk Theravada Bhante Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Why did this merge occur? To just have further outreach as far as your undergoing is concerned?
Yeah, actually, the reason is that Bhante Bhikkhu Bodhi is also my personal teacher, right? And when I met him in person in 2018, he already started Buddhist Global Relief in the United States in 2008. And it's a very good organization. And he was like a role model how this could be done. And he is very well known. He was invited by United Nations many times to give speeches. He is a very well-known scholar in Buddhism. And he's known for his integrity, for his political engagement in the United States, for his outspokenness against injustice and so on. He is really a remarkable figure. And I had the sense that if I would start something on my own, who am I? You know, I don't represent anything. But to have him as the leading person would open more doors. And he agreed on that, and he became our patron, the patron of the organization. So he doesn't have to do our practical work, but he is still the figure, so to say. And we work with Buddhist Global Relief very closely together as a sister organization, because we want to be connected with other groups and be more strong. Like together with them, we have far more resources. We can start projects together, which we, with our small donations, so to say, would not be able to support. Sometimes we support 10% and they support 90% of the project, because they are already far more established, and the amount of donation that they get is really huge meanwhile. And so first we want to have friends. We want to be connected with a lot of groups. Also, that's why we don't want to limit that to Germany or German-speaking countries, but we want to establish actually a work that goes into a lot of European countries, and would like to have a European branch, so to say, of this work, because we think that the more we work together, the more we can change, right? And so Bhante Bodhi is just a very integrative and intelligent and keen and selfless person that inspires you to do such a work.
Great. That's all from our side. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for answering so much questions. Let me just end the recording.